dog has fleas. Hi, I'm Ernie Gerardo, again. Last time we left off, I believe we talked a little bit about the post-process and, went through my presentation. So now, like I said before, let's talk about some video shooting techniques. We're going to be focusing mostly on phone videography because it's going to be the kind of camera that you have the most access to. Now, being NYU students, you probably also have access to a full equipment locker, so we'll also get into shooting with DSLRs and mirrorless cameras. Just, beginning stuff. But let's talk about some of my favorite apps and tools to use for the phone shooting. Now, I'm personally an iPhone user, so I actually really like the native app that comes on iPhones. If you have the 6S and up, it's actually capable of shooting 4K. And you already know how to use this thing, but if you don't, if you go into the settings menu, eventually you can click on the camera. Now there's a lot of different settings here, but when you record your video, you can actually just hit record video. You can determine what the resolution and frame rate will be. If you want to shoot in slow motion, there's also an option for that. Now let's see what this footage looks like when shot on the iPhone. That's not bad, but let's see what we can get if we use an application that takes full advantage of the iPhone hardware. For example, this is Filmic Pro. This is something you can get on the iTunes App Store, and it's got a lot of really granular features. Just popping into the settings here, for instance, you can see that we can pick out our resolution and our aspect ratio. We could pick what our frame rate will be. We could set up our audio, so if you have any peripherals for your iPhone, this will help you with audio. And by the way, if you didn't notice, there's also audio metering on the side here. If you've got a gimbal, which we'll get into in a second, you can sync it up with this. And of course, Filmic has its own proprietary content management system. In addition to these features, you can also do things like adjust the color balance, or just set an automatic white balance. You can zoom, and you can also adjust focus. More of that can be done with a more in-depth look at Filmic, but this is something I like to use if I'm shooting with my iPhone. Now, when you're shooting with a phone, sometimes stabilization can be an issue. So you might consider using something like this. This is a phone gimbal. As I mentioned before, the software that I like to use syncs up with it pretty well. So as a result, it gets pretty good stable footage. Let me show you what I got. Now, while on the M50, you can see me moving around. What you're seeing is a relatively stable tracking shot from the phone. It helps when you're moving up, helps when you're moving down for those crane shots, and really nice for a tracking shot. You can also set these up to follow a target. It's pretty good at recognizing faces, and really good for orbital shots, like walking around something. You'll get to try this out when I bring everything in on the class. So one thing I'd like to note, if you are using one of the DSLRs, is glass is an important thing. I've got a fast prime lens on here right now because it kind of gives you a nice background blur, but you'll see some of the other videos, it's a little bit clearer with a wider range. That was my zoom lens. So if you have a chance to work with the DSLRs, just try and get to know the glass that you have access to a little bit better. I'm not going to get too heavy into shooting with these things because I'm not sure how many of you are going to be using them for your videos, but if you get the opportunity, it's a good chance to practice. Now, you can shoot a pretty decent video using automatic settings, but if you take a minute and you just get into things like white balance, color balance, shutter speed, frame rate, and resolution, well, you can get the pretty good looking video. Now, some of you actually might have one of these. This is an action camera. The most popular one is the GoPro, but I've got the Yi 4K Plus because, well, it was less expensive. Action cameras are not the best when it comes to filming footage because it's mostly for if you're going to like tie it to yourself, if you're gonna go like snowboarding, get some good POV shots. The only movie that I can think of that used action cameras in a cinematic way was something called Hardcore Henry, where the entire thing felt like a video game from first person. But let me show you exactly what your footage is gonna look like when you're trying to use an action camera for doing things like capturing sound. Okay, so here's me recording footage off my action camera. It's like pretty okay here. Sound's probably not as good, but you know, it's really good for motion and stuff like that. But mostly if you're going to be, you know, moving this thing around a whole lot. Okay, he doesn't really feel like moving around much. That's not a good example, but you know, the footage is all right. Last bit, let's talk about sound for a second. Sound is going to be really important for your video. And, well, let me show you what I'm recording this on. That is a Rode Video Mic Go. It's probably the most middling of the budget DSLR shotgun mics, but does the job slightly better than the onboard mic. If you can, I like to do voiceover with a condenser microphone, something like this. You don't have to have a really expensive U87 or something like that. Just a regular dynamic microphone, like something you would buy at Guitar Center for 80 bucks, will do the job just fine. Also, if you want to go to Best Buy, Blue makes a good line of USB condensers that don't require an interface. The interface is actually built in. So if you want to expand on your voiceover, that's a good place to start. However, if you're in a pinch and you just need to use your phone, I actually really like the Voice Memos app. Yeah, you just hit the button right here, boom, and you've started a brand new recording. Hold up the bottom part where the microphone is, and it was a dark and stormy night. Yeah, seriously, you can get some really good response on this thing. Then it's just a matter of taking your new recording and sharing it. You can make a message, send it to mail, save to your files. Me, I'm gonna text it to myself. Okay, so now that I've talked about gear, let's just talk a little bit about the technique that we're gonna use for the video we're gonna shoot in the class. And then, by the way, I don't have a sound recorder, so it could just end up being that we end up using the phone as our sound recorder, and the camera that I'm recording this on now will be our primary camera. So the format of the video we like to do in the class is usually an interview, because it helps with both communicating with your subject and also some framing techniques. So for a very singular subject, you're going to want a ratio of 2/3 space, subject in the center, filling out a third. Well, you can actually, when you're doing something called a two-shot, divide up the frame. Let me show you.
How did we get here? How did you do that?
A cool thing you can do is the thing I did just now. They call that a stop trick, which is one of the first special effects ever used when recording video. And all it entails is stopping the camera, putting something in its place, and then making it appear like the thing just appeared. But you have to be kind of careful, because if you haven't taken all the movements into consideration when you're doing the stop trick, you'll end up with a continuity error. And sometimes, if you're not doing it on purpose, it can be pretty noticeable. For instance, where did my dog go? And there you have it. The best of my shooting and recording techniques. Obviously, we'll expand on this more in the class, but there are, if you are really interested in this, there are several YouTubers who explain this way better than I did and more in depth. However, I hope you have what you need to shoot your videos, and I'm looking forward to see what you guys make. See you in class.